We're talking pass rushers today, pass rush percentage, sacks for NFL teams in 2021, and what that tells us about the 2022 NFL season. And I've got a question for Matt, if he can help me out with this one. He's a guy that worked in college football. I have no idea what's going on with USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. Let's see if Matt Williamson can help me make some sense of that one as well on today's Peacock and Williamson.
You're listening to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show, your daily podcast on the National Football League, powered by the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and Matt Williamson with you at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks for making us your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. It's what we do, even though it's the off season. July 1. Happy July. I hope everyone has a great 4th of July weekend. We are going to take a day off Monday to observe that Independence Day, and we will be back with you guys Tuesday after this. And we're talking pass rushers, Matt, today. But first, just real quick, I got to ask you the question: what the hell is going on in college football? Because as much, I'm really unique in that I probably watch the most college football of any human being alive that doesn't care at all about college football. I watch so many college football players and plays every season with only one objective, and it's about the NFL draft and who do I like, and sort of scouting players in an amateur way, because I've been a draftnik for forever. But I don't care at all. I have no rooting interest. I went to San Francisco State. We didn't have a football program. Sonoma State lost their football program after Larry Allen was there at some point in the 90s as well. We didn't have. I didn't have a college football rivalry. I always find it weird when people root for colleges that they didn't attend. That's a weird thing to me that I don't understand.
I hear
it. College football is baffling, and it gets more baffling to me every single season, even though I watch so many players and so many college football plays, because I don't really care about it. And a lot of what I watch in January through April rather than, September through December. And, I see the big games and the bowl games and the championship and those things usually live. But throughout the season, I don't even watch as much as I do in the spring. So maybe you can help me out with this one, Matt. How the heck can Rutgers, UCLA, and USC be in the same football conference?
I can't help you that much, but I do think it's an interesting conversation. And maybe it's more interesting, both of our takes on college football overall, because I guess I'll peel back. I don't know if I've ever really gone down this road. Born in 1973, Pittsburgh guy, of course. So the Steelers of the 70s were dominant. But the underlying story was, go look at the Pitt teams from like Tony Dorsett, 76 through Marino. I mean, they were like 1 or 2 in the country every year. I mean, they were a powerhouse with Hugh Green and Bill Fralick and Lyman Galore and Chris Dolman. And I mean, they put out guys. Still, I paid attention. My dad would have the Pitt game on Saturday. Pitt-Penn State was a huge rivalry. I think but I didn't pay a ton of attention. I mean, I still was reading Mel's Big Book as opposed to watching Ohio State, Michigan when I was 10. So it was always about the NFL for me. And I went to Pitt. But I went to Pitt at Johnstown. It's a branch campus that doesn't have a team. I didn't even watch the Pitt games or care if they won or lost at that point. Not long after college, I got hired by Pitt. And I think my first game on the sidelines at Pitt, which was the first game ever at Heinz Field, I'm pretty sure was the second college football game I've ever attended in my life. So and even whenever I left Akron and went to the Browns, I always thought, I'm going to pay attention to recruiting. I was so into it for 3.5 years. I'm going to watch every college game. But then I got married and I had kids, and Saturday all of a sudden becomes Target and Bed Bath & Beyond day. It's just and even like this time of year, every year I convince myself, man, I'm ahead of the game on the next draft. I know more names this year than I ever did. And then the season will hit and I won't even know who wins and loses or who's ranked number 1, and then I catch up again late. So I think we're kind of in the same boat. I mean, I've been employed by 2 different college teams. And I will say, where my area of the country is, especially compared to yours, Penn State's 3 hours down the road. Columbus, Ohio State's about 2.5 the opposite direction, and Michigan's about 4 to the north. So it's Big Ten country without question. But that brings me just to geography. I know this is all about money, and I'm sure that there's some basketball implications. Michigan, UCLA, Indiana, UCLA. I mean, and again, I know nothing about basketball either. But I just think about, you're a California dude, California kid, grew up in Cali, goes to USC. He's the golden boy, and he has to play at Wisconsin or Indiana in November at 1:00, and it's windy and nasty, and it's 10:00 his time, and he's like, what did I sign up for?
And I saw a lot of folks making fun of Pac-12 style of football, and some California recruit that is a 215-pound linebacker that all of a sudden has to set the edge against Wisconsin's offensive lineman, in November or something like that. And so it's a different style of football, or traditionally it has been, although, everybody's going more spread happy, obviously. Even teams like Wisconsin and in Iowa, who had been the most pro style college football teams forever, are, going that direction too. But I like the Rose Bowl. So now can two California teams play each other in the Rose Bowl? How is that?
I don't know. I
think
it's a really interesting development.
Changes.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very interesting development. I guess it's all about money nowadays, super conferences, but I don't really know what I'm talking about.
The short answer, money. That was the answer that I was looking for. It's money. Also,
like, be interesting,
and even more and more, like, how much of a farce is like the actual school part of
right.
Athletes and academics, because you got to be traveling 3,000 miles to Rutgers to play a football game, right?
Yeah.
And in the middle of a semester. So, I mean, that's going to wreck your entire week, obviously. How do you go to school, period, in that case? Like, at least, because that's what made sense about college conferences. Like, at least the travel wasn't that bad, and you could get some schoolwork done, and you're not gone for as long. But these are much longer trips now, and it's just wild. It's the professionalism of college sports that's been going on for a while, and I don't have a problem with it. It's just super weird, and it stops making sense. At some point, how do you? There's just like, it feels like there's no governing body of college.
Right. It's like the Wild West.
Wait, what are we even doing? And like, how do you decide like what is even important anymore? It gets so convoluted. And so that's where it's weird. And it's always been weird to me anyway. That's why I like professional sports. So I'm a pro guy, not a college guy. UCLA, USC in the Big Ten. Sure. Whatever. I don't get it. I didn't get it before. So
right. I have one other angle I just kind of thought of, though, since we had this conversation. I'm thinking of the West coming east, and boy, this is not what I signed up for. However, Kenny Pickett's top target was Jordan Addison at Pitt, who won the Blitnikoff, great receiver. He transfers to USC and makes $1 bazillion or whatever it was. Pitt couldn't match it. Now he's at USC, supposed to be a first-round pick next year, really good player. So I'm thinking through the recruiting lens. If I'm UCLA or USC, I'm saying to the Michigan dudes and the Wisconsin dudes, we got a spot for you on the left coast. And BP, I'm proud of where I live, and I would never move. But I can concede that maybe weather and living conditions on your side of the country are a little more gentle and enjoyable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's some give and take there. There's property value and the cost of living. And then there's, 70 degrees every day. Which is
right.
All right, cool. So depending on where you are in California, California's a big state. It is a large state. There's a lot of topography. There is a lot of weather patterns going on in the state of California. So it depends on where you are. Cool. Yeah. Let's not talk any more college football. Let's talk pro football. Let's talk NFL pass rushers and pass rush percentages and sacks for NFL teams in 2021, what that means in 2022 coming up. But first, let's tell the folks out there about BetOnline, your number one source for all your betting needs and wagering and sports information this season. Find all the latest developments, league reviews, news, including Major League Baseball all summer long. At least we have that in the dead part of the summer when there is no more NBA, no more hockey, no more NFL, but you can still bet on the futures for the NBA. You can bet on futures for hockey, and of course, a ton of NFL futures at BetOnline. Who the next coach is that's going to be fired. We've already got odds for weeks of, I think every week except for week 17 and 18, they've got weekly game odds already up at BetOnline. So if you think you've got an advantage before the season starts, get over there and bet on the next Super Bowl champion. BetOnline, your continued source for not just sports wagering, but information, live betting, esports, scores, fighting, celebrity boxing, whatever it is you want to bet on. Golf, they've got it at BetOnline. So get over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action at BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, Matt, this is another part of your off-season spreadsheet that continues to grow. We talked a little bit about some quarterback stuff, and this is universally some important statistics here, because I know you have fun with your own stats sometimes. You're like, well, let's put this stat and this stat together and see what we get and what we learn from things. And I know some folks get mad at you about the way you did your quarterback stats. And it's like, look, if you got a low yards per attempt or yards, average depth of target, low depth of target, and you're not completing a lot of passes, that's bad. And so it's an easy way to find those things. But today we're talking pass rush, we're talking blitz percentages and sack numbers, but pressure percentage, I think, is the most important part of this, because disruption equals production is what I like to say about that. And sometimes sacks don't tell the whole story, but they do tell a story. But pressure percentage is really what I'm interested here, and the percentage of how often teams blitz and how they utilize pressure too, and who's trying to create pressure and how they create it. It's all fascinating stuff.
All very fascinating stuff. And this one's a little tougher. Real quick, I was going to throw out a note, because a lot of people on Twitter gave me suggestions or better math minds than I am for the quarterback, thing we did the other day. And someone suggested, just combine ranks. Don't do the multiplication. And maybe even next week I can revisit that, because Joe Burrow came out on top. If you just look at it and go, he was the number 1 ranked completion percentage, the number 10 ranked ADOT guy. So a lot of the same results, but a better math mind pointing me in a direction.
Yeah, well, because it's imperfect the way you were doing it.
Right.
Multiplying percentages there, but at the same time, we highlighted Burrow as super impressive it's clear utilizing what we did that Joe Burrow was at the top, and we highlighted him. I actually used Joe Burrow in the thumbnail image for the YouTube, because it was clear that Joe Burrow was really amazing in that, even though the way you did it, he didn't rank number 1. And we talked about why, Justin Fields' season wasn't good, even though he was high, but his yards or his average depth of target buoyed that, and there it gives you hope. So there's just a lot you can learn from this data, no matter how you look at it. Sometimes you stand on your head and you see things a little bit differently. So imperfect, sure, but you learn a lot from looking at these types of things. And I think there's some things that are clear, like Joe Burrow was amazing last year, and we knew that from what you know that from watching the games, you know it from whatever stats you want to look at. Joe Burrow was really good, and looking at the ranks is an interesting way to do it as well.
And Sam Darnold and Ben Roethlisberger and Zach Wilson were all at the bottom too. It's pretty much the same results, but it's just probably a better way of combining them.
Yes.
As for this one, I basically started with the same premise, that I want to know how many sacks a team generates versus how often they blitz. And blitz being defined, rushing 5 or more. It could be 7, it could be 11. 5 or more. They're bringing extra guys, more than 4. Now, again, this isn't perfect either, because I don't know if everyone out there knows what a green dog blitz is. Okay, a green dog blitz is, I'm a linebacker. This is simple terms. I'm a linebacker who has this running back in man coverage. The running back is staying in protection, so I'm going to come now. It's better than me standing around. I might as well blitz and add to the pass rush equation, even though it wasn't a blitz call. So, maybe that's 2% of them. So you still get a pretty good idea who's blitzing heavy, who isn't, who's creating sacks, who isn't. But then I took a third column and I pulled up the pressure rank, because, and this I had pause about it. I want your input on. I think pressures now are a widely enough accepted stat that we can all understand what a pressure is. I can't define it like I can a sack or a blitz. And it bothers me that somebody sits in a dark room and says, yep, that's a pressure. Oh, that's not. But again, we don't have to be 100% dead on balls accurate. You know what I mean? And I do think that the reason I was interested in pressure rate is, I'm a believer, and this is a Pro Football Focus thing, that it's better to get pressures than sacks. And eventually, over a big enough sample size, the guys that get consistent pressures will get the sacks. Like I remember the one year Vic Beasley, I think he had 16 sacks, but his pressure rate was terrible. Well, he was just kind of lucky that year in terms of
lucky.
yeah.
He had some clean runs at the quarterback with his style of pass rusher, and he hit on a lot of those. And when he gets blocked kind of thing. And I will add also that sometimes there's a play that happens that's better for the defense than a sack. So you can get a pressure that forces the quarterback to make a bad throw. You get an interception on second down. That's better than a sack.
Yeah, right.
You got turnover. So it's not only about sacks as far as pass rush goes.
100%. I mean, I might rather lead the league in pressure percentage than I do sacks. But I bet if you ask a bunch of defensive coaches, they'll say, give me a sack every time because that kills the drive and that causes fumbles too. You know, I mean, I got to hit on the quarterback. I mean,
right. Yeah. Hit the quarterback for sure.
Yes. So I don't know how you want to do this. I mean, we're already halfway through the show. I put together this spreadsheet, and then as I've been doing with some of these things, I tweeted out like 6 to 8 observations of teams that stood out, positive, negative, while they blitzed a lot but didn't get home, vice versa, who's the best, who's the worst. Just so happens our two teams are at the top of the list. Or we could just kind of say these are the best, these are the most sacks, but these are the teams that blitz the most. I mean, however you want to handle it in terms of addressing it to the audience is cool by me. But I found a lot out by this. I mean, I do think blitz percentage is important.
Yeah, I think the listeners out there can look up who's the most and least in sacks, and I think we'll kind of cover some of those things while we talk about some of these teams, because the outliers are pretty obvious here. So let's just go through the teams that are the most interesting when you look at blitz percentage and sacks and pressure rates.
Real quick, I found this a little bit fascinating too, that the worst team in the league in terms of just sack numbers was Atlanta. They had 18. I mean, like TJ Watt had more sacks than the Falcons. The second worst team was 29. I mean, the Falcons were 11 sacks worse than number 31 and a few sacks worse than some individual players in the league. And so really the discrepancy in sacks, basically Atlanta aside, goes from 29, which surprisingly is the Eagles, to 55, which is my Steelers. They led the league by 4 more sacks than anyone else. Oh, by the way, I don't brag about this enough, but that's the 5th year in a row the Steelers have led the league in sacks, which has never happened in NFL history. So there is a pretty wide gap. It's not just, they had 3 sacks different. They're ranked, 10 spots higher. I mean, 55 sacks versus 29, let alone 18, is a lot over the course of a 17-game season.
And of course, there's luck involved, but they have by far the lowest pressure percentage as well. So there is some correlation. It's not complete luck when it comes to sacks, just like the Pittsburgh Steelers are showing. They get after the quarterback, and that's why they lead this league in sacks. And maybe they will be 3rd this year, but that's because they create pressure, right?
Yeah.
But the 18 sacks when the next worst team in the NFL is 29 is one of the most appalling, like, clutch your pearls stats that we've talked about this offseason for the Atlanta Falcons. That is unbelievable. You are a non-functional. Your defense does not function if you're that bad at getting after opposing quarterbacks.
Yeah, and they were also 32nd in pressure rank. They were 19th in blitz rate, though. So it wasn't like they didn't blitz at all. Like I mentioned, the Eagles are a little shocking in that, wow, they're the 2nd least amount of sacks. Well, only one team blitzed less than the Eagles. So that doesn't look quite as bad. If I'm not getting home with the sacks, at least I have 7 in coverage the whole time, where Atlanta is middle of the road in blitz, and they're at the bottom, Mariana's Trench in terms of pressure. And then on the opposite spectrum, I'm bragging here about the Steelers, but they were 7th in pressure rank. The Vikings had the 2nd most sacks. They were 8th in pressure rank. The Rams and Bears were 3rd and 4th in the league in sacks, but were 25th and 23rd in pressure rank. So that's probably going to come down a little. I mean, the Bears in particular stands out. Like, I doubt you'll have the 4th amount of sacks in the league if you're the 23rd best pressure ranked team.
I'm just looking. I just can't believe the Falcons. I'm looking at their
It's amazing.
And they did add Arnold Ebiketie. I thought it was a
right.
nice pick in the 2nd round. But Ebiketie by himself isn't going to fix the pass rush and fix that defense. So there's still a lot of work to do on that Falcons roster. And it's why, a lot of people are, and me included, have them as one of the worst rosters in the NFL. I do like the Ebiketie pick, though.
I do, too.
I mean, you can't fix that in one offseason with,
No.
So you draft a wide receiver at number 10.
Right. So a couple little nuggets here, too. the Bucks, they blitzed the most, and they end up with the 7th most sacks. The Dolphins blitz the 2nd most; they end up with the 5th most sacks. So some of these things add up. They're blitzing, and it's working. Let me just read some of the tweets I came up with here.
Yeah, let's get to some of those bullet points next. I do want to first thank everybody for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day. For your second listen, make sure you are, first of all, subscribed to the Locked On NFL YouTube channel. Not only the Peacock and Williamson NFL show there, but the Locked On NFL podcast, national NFL experts and insiders keep fans dialed in with the biggest stories and the latest news from around the league, because an offseason doesn't equal a break in the action. So much content here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team is covered not only in the NFL, but every professional league and college football. And you want to find out more about this move in the Big Ten, you can find that as well in the Locked On Pac-12 and Locked On Big Ten podcasts. And are those podcasts going to have to change names? We're going back to the Pac-10 now. I don't know how that works. The Big 16 or whatever it is. I don't know how many teams are in the Big Ten now, but you can find all of that on the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Matt. Yeah, let's get into these most interesting. Can we start with the 49ers? Because I know
if you'd like. I have 9 teams I highlighted.
I know you tweeted about this one, and this one, the 49ers, we mentioned how the Falcons just drafted a 2nd-round pass rusher, and so did the 49ers. They drafted Drake Jackson, but the 49ers really stand out on this list because of how little they blitz, but how much pressure they still create.
Yeah, they're one of the most impressive.
It's clearly the theme of the 49ers since John Lynch took over as GM and Kyle Shanahan. You think of him as an offensive guy, maybe a finesse team. They're all about the defensive line and the pressure. John Lynch talks about how important it was for him to have such a great defensive line in front of him when he was playing safety in the NFL. And that is the most important thing that this regime has done with the 49ers. So when you think San Francisco 49ers under Lynch and Shanahan, think they're going to build from the defensive line first. And they've done that. They've put resources there. And this shows, and it helps when you can get that much pressure and not have to blitz.
Yes. And I can't say enough what a superstar Nick Bosa is. I mean, I think everyone looks at Watt and Garrett as the best edge rushers in the league. It might be Nick Bosa. I mean, he's right there and might surpass them all. I mean, I think he actually is a smidge underrated nationally. I also have been told, again, assistant coaches are a really hard thing for all of us to comment on. But from what I understand, the Niners defensive line coach is a total superstar. So,
yeah, Chris Kocurek, he gets guys. Arden Key last year, just thrown away by the.
Very talented guy at LSU, had some problems.
Right. Thrown away by the Raiders, comes to the 49ers, has a big season, gets paid. We saw it with Kerry Hyder a couple years ago, goes to the Seahawks, gets paid. Niners can't pay it, does nothing. And now the Niners just got him back for nothing, So Kerry Hyder's back with Chris Kocurek in that defensive line. And he runs that wide 9 scheme. And it's all about, playing the run on the way to the quarterback and just ferocity. And they bring it. And he's a high energy guy. And Chris Kocurek. And the thing is he's a superstar defensive line coach. I don't know if he's defensive coordinator material, but he's definitely one of the best defensive line coaches in the NFL.
Maybe you hope he isn't, so he stays
right.
There forever.
Exactly. You kind of hope
out. So, and the other thing, to your point, from the front office down, they're never going to shortchange the D line. Armstead, Buckner, Kinlaw. I mean, these guys are all high picks. Bosa used another early pick this year. So again, I have 9 teams highlighted that stood out to me. As kind of, and here's what I wrote for the Niners. The NFL's average blitz percentage was 25.4% last year. So about a quarter of the snaps in the NFL across the league, people are bringing 5 or more. Well, the Niners blitz just a smidge under 20%, but the Niners were but the Niners 48 sacks was 5th best in the league. So they're getting home and keeping 7 in the coverage.
Yeah, and not just sacks; they were among the tops in pressure rates as well. Yeah, so or at least middle of the road in pressure rates. So they're pretty good pressure rates, but really good at getting home. And it's pretty telling. And were the Raiders one of the teams?
The Raiders were one of the teams. I'm scrolling through my timeline here at Williamson NFL.
Sorry, I'm taking you out of order, but that was the one thing that I want to make sure we talked about because of how little the Raiders blitzed, almost so much so that you talk about the 49ers were one of the lower blitz rates at 19.8.
The Raiders are very interesting.
the Raiders 12% blitz percentage, and they didn't generate that great of a pass rush. So start blitzing. You know what I mean? It's like at some point you're beating your head against the wall because what you're doing is not working.
See, I'm going to fight you a little on that because the Raiders, I'm sorry, the Seattle cover 2 is dead. And the Raiders were really the last team playing it last year. And that coordinator went to the Colts, which I don't think is a great thing for the Colts. So that's a rush 4 type of scheme going back to Pete Carroll and Michael Bennett and Averill and all those dudes.
Yeah.
So to your point, they only blitzed 12% of the time, by far least in the league. I mentioned the Eagles before. They were second in blitz percentage at 16.4. So even 4% less than the second least team. But they still ended up with a pressure rate at league average. Max Crosby's good. And now you add Chandler Jones, so I think their pass rush is decent when you consider pound for pound players coming at the quarterback. They still were league average in pressure rate. They weren't tremendous with sacks, though.
Yeah, I think you also see that it starts to paint the picture. Like they had good pass rushers, but
you're asking a lot of
teams knew what they were doing, and you've got to be multiple in this day and age in the NFL. Like it's a positionless football league. So cool, you have 2 good pass rushers. Well, we know exactly where they are every single play, and we know where everyone else is every single play. So it doesn't help you overall. So move guys around, throw a blitz here, disguise things. And so that's where we're at in today's NFL. So that's a great point by you.
How about these other teams that stood out? I'm just going through the timeline here. We mentioned the Bears earlier because they were very high in sacks, but low in pressure rate. But 20 defenses blitzed at a higher rate than the Bears last year. But they also had Khalil Mack, and now they don't. Right. I don't know that gets better. And again, I mean, the sack number high, the pressure rate low scares me, but they didn't blitz much.
And looking at Eberflus's defense, the new head coach there in Chicago, again, pressure rate low, blitz percentage low, but a ton of turnovers for that team, which is odd. You would think pressure would result in turnovers. So, I guess Eberflus is just going to put everybody in coverage and hope the offense throws the ball to their guys. I don't
know how sticky turnovers are. But I also think the Colts with those long arm linebackers are built for turnovers.
Yes. And it would seem that it wouldn't change that much as far as these percentages go for now the new defensive coordinator and the new scheme in Indianapolis, which will also blitz less.
Very little, right? Probably bottom of the league. The Bills, who we know are a very good team. They're going to be number 1 in everyone's power ranks. They were league average in blitz percentage, but they led the league by a wide margin in pressure rate. Now they've added Von Miller.
Good luck, everybody else.
Right.
Good luck rest of the AFC.
Yep. I mean, that's a little frightening. Like, that's the Bills just saying, we know we're good. We're going to make an extreme strength. And Von Miller's going to take Rousseau and Boogie Basham and make them better. And we're already really good at this.
We've talked so much,
Pat Mahomes,
Yeah, because we talked about the arms race in the AFC all offseason. And I thought the most fascinating part of that wasn't even the quarterback movement. It was the pass rusher movement to chase after those quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Realizing that, okay, right. Look, we've already got a good quarterback. So how do we fight against these other teams that are getting better? Go kill their quarterbacks, right?
Yeah.
And don't allow Patrick Mahomes to outduel you in January, because he's got someone in his face constantly. And so it's pretty remarkable what these AFC teams are doing and how they're combating each other. And if the Bills are even better, and they were the best in the league already at pressure rate, and just get home a few more times, get a little bit more sack luck with it. They were still pretty good at 42 sacks in the NFL, which was top 10 or so, right? The top 11. So that's a scary defense to go with what the firepower they have on offense with Josh Allen.
And you got to think they're going to be playing with a lead late in games often too. And in a way that skews things a little for the defense. I mean, if you're the Chiefs or the Bills and you're playing with a lot of leads, that sure helps, where you're the Lions or the Jags, it's hard to get fourth quarter sacks and pressure.
Yeah.
But still those teams are interesting too. So the Lions were also a high blitz, low sack, low pressure rate defense last year, but they added Aiden Hutchinson. These teams recognize their problems.
That's true. I mean, and yeah, that's why pass rushers are artificially in some ways pushed up the draft boards every year. It's too important. You're not, like we talked about with the Falcons. You're non-functional. I saw this with the 49ers before they brought in Dee Ford and Nick Bosa in the same offseason. Their defense was awful. They were a bad football team. They had the number 2 pick in the draft. Then they went to the Super Bowl. It's like you go from non-functional to maybe an amazing defense with just a pass rush. It's one of the most important things you can have in the NFL.
Right. I don't think Aiden Hutchinson is going to be Nick Bosa. And they may have taken him if they had the best pass rush in the league because he was just the best player on the board and they're picking second. But you would think one of their real problem areas at least improves. And again, these teams know what they are. I mentioned the Steelers before. They're one of the other teams. Most sacks in the NFL, yet again. 7th best pressure rate. But unlike usual, it's not Blitzburg here anymore. I mean, they're just league average in terms of sending extra pressure. That's changed the last couple of years. Again, they've led the league in sacks 5 years in a row. But it's usually like Dick LeBeau zone blitzes, Polamalu comes free. That's not really what happens here anymore. It's Watt and Hayward,
Yeah, and still Watt and Hayward, but some other, movement over the last few years on the roster. Do you think that at some point is going to come down to earth, the sack production for the Steelers?
If maybe. I mean, their front four is good, not great. There's 2 stars. The Tuitt thing's a problem. They're not bashful about blitzing, and it's also noteworthy that they did hire Brian Flores, who was the second most blitz-happy coach in the league last year. So maybe they'll get more aggressive, but they don't have the Miami corners to leave them on islands, which actually brings me to the Ravens. I mean, the Ravens under Wink Martindale are known as a very, very blitz-heavy team, and we know they got crushed by injuries last year. And they love to leave Marcus Peters and Humphrey on islands and blitz like crazy and don't really invest in pass rushers as much as they do secondary. And Pro Football Focus just put out their defensive back ranks and had the Ravens number 1. But this was the worst pass defense in the league last year by a major, by a wide margin. And again, injuries are much to blame. But I think here's why Wink Martindale is not back with the Ravens. Only 7 defenses had a worse pressure rate than Baltimore. Only 8 defenses created fewer sacks than Baltimore. But the Ravens' blitz percentage was 6th highest in the league. That's a bad combo. So they kept blitzing, leaving their corners that were 4th-string guys not getting home and getting beat deep. I mean, terrible combination.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Miami Dolphins. They stand out far above the rest as far as they were 7% higher than anybody else in blitz rate last year. 40% for Tampa, just under 40%, 39.6 for the Miami Dolphins. Just clearly way out in front, 1 and 2. They both created a lot of sacks though. So these are teams that are saying, look, and this is kind of what I was going back to with the Raiders. It's like you have to get pressure. So I would rather have 6 in coverage and get pressure than have 7 in coverage and not get home. So if you have to create it, then create it. And that's clearly what the Dolphins and the Bucs did.
And the Dolphins are spending $1 bazillion on corners. Right. And what's interesting too is Todd Bowles goes from defensive coordinator to head coach. Flores goes from the Dolphins to the Steelers, but they kept the defensive coordinator from the last staff, even though they hired, a new head coach in Miami. So I would imagine these things stay, keep that same sort of pace at least. A couple more teams just to buzz through if you want.
Yeah, roll through.
This is a lot like the Lions. The Jags blitzed the 5th highest rate, but only 4 defenses had fewer sacks. Yeah. Yuck. And the first overall pick's a pass rusher, though.
Right. And that's sort of the struggle.
You're right.
And that it hurts my argument in some ways because I was like, just keep blitzing. And they did. They still weren't getting home. So it's like, well, what are you going to do? You're damned either way, I guess. Because it's not like
bad players and you're losing all the time. It makes it tough. Yeah. So, I mean, again, the Jags and the Lions didn't have the same 4th quarter opportunities to get, garbage sacks that the Bills did. But still, it was a problem. And again, they used the first 2 picks in the draft for pass rushers. That might be – I have one more team, and that's the Chiefs. And I just said this, that the Chiefs are very interesting. Only 4 defenses had fewer sacks. I think people don't realize They were the 5th worst last year in sacks, but they blitzed a little more than league average. However, the blitz rate here isn't all that important, but the pressure rate was 6th best, but their sack percentage was 5th worst, or their sack total was fifth worst.
I think it's 4th worst. I think
4th worst. You're right.
Games. Yeah.
Yep.
And they had, so the Chiefs had 31 sacks. The Eagles, who were 2nd worst, had 29. So they're only 2 off of that. So
yeah,
they were
terrible.
They were really bad in sack numbers, but 6th best in pressure rate in the NFL last year.
So I finished that tweet just saying the sacks will probably come. Like history shows, if you're high in pressure rate, maybe you were unlucky for 17 games, but you probably won't be unlucky for 50 games,
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's a
and they went and drafted Karlaftis too. Like these teams know these things.
Yeah, absolutely. And they lost Charvarius Ward, one of their starting corners.
Mm-hmm.
They added McDuffie. We'll see if McDuffie's an outside guy or a slot guy for them. But interesting team in Kansas City. They're a fascinating team. And I almost feel like just because maybe it's Andy Reid, maybe it's just because of their quarterback. I feel like they're always an outlier in everything, and they're just a weird team, and you can't really figure them out.
I tend to agree with you. And, again, you look at their draft, first 2 picks, 2 first-round defensive players. Then they take Sky Moore, and then they take 3 more defensive players. So 5 of their first 6 picks, all in the top 135, are on the defensive side of the ball, with the exception of Sky Moore. Again, these teams know, and their first pick or second pick was a pass rusher. Mm-hmm. Well, they're trying to address their problems. It just, I think it's a great way to try to get in the minds of these teams.
Are you going to post the entire spreadsheet for the folks to look at on Twitter when I post this podcast, so that way people can see exactly what the numbers are that we're talking about here?
Okay, I'm going to sound like a very old man here. I would like to, but if you noticed from my tweet last time with the quarterback spreadsheet, all I did was grab my phone and take a picture of my screen like an old man. I'm sure there's an easier way to share this thing via Twitter. I will try to do that, but this spreadsheet's just bigger, so I don't know if I could take a picture of the whole thing at once like an old man. I'm sorry. I'm technically challenged.
Well, you know what I can do, actually? Hold on. Let's see.
I sent it to you. You want to go to town?
I can. Yeah, I'll screenshot this one.
Okay. You're the youth of the podcast here.
Technological heavy lifting here.
Or I could go ask my 13-year-old how to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I can make a TikTok of it. There we go.
Right.
All right. Fantastic stuff. Matt Williamson's offseason spreadsheet continues to grow. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in and making Peacock and Williamson your first listen. Make sure for your second listen, you're checking out everything else the network has to offer. Your team is covered. Subscribe to the Locked On NFL channel on YouTube, which is the home of the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Matt and I back Tuesday right here, Peacock and Williamson.